That's
No?
No? Okay. All right.
Listen. Welcome to the Untold Horrors podcast, the show where two horror-loving film nerds mine the depths of Tubi to unearth hidden treasures. Our goal is to help you discover great films you never knew existed. I'm Stephanie, and I'll be one of your tour guides for this expedition. I'm joined by my co-host Jamie, who had the honor of picking this week's theme for exploration. Jamie, why don't you tell the folks what subgenre you chose to explore and the 3 films you picked for me based solely on the brief Tubi synopsis and poster art.
The theme I selected for us was infected horror. The 3 films I chose were 2012's Sick Survive the Night, which is about 3 survivors sheltering in an abandoned house during a zombie apocalypse. I also chose 2015's Danish horror film What We Become, which is about a family unraveling during a plague. And finally, 2021's Winter Hunger, which is about people trying to survive rabies, a rabies virus mutation that has been transmitted to humans. So, Stephanie, why don't you tell us what you picked and why you picked it, and then I'll provide a brief background about that motion picture.
Okay. I chose What We Become because I am a sucker for foreign films, and the description of a family trying to survive a bloody berserk summer in the middle of a zombie plague sounded like it could be intense and thrilling. So it sounded like it could be something with a little bit of depth that we could talk about.
Yes, I agree. What We Become is a 2015 Danish horror movie directed by Bo Mikkelsen, or Mikkelsen. It's probably Mikkelsen. And it is the first post-apocalyptic zombie movie to be made in Denmark. It has a chilling tagline: "Stay home, lock up, don't breathe." The film was released in 4 cinemas across Denmark on March 31st, 2016, and that prompted concern from reviewers that the film could flop due to this. However, the film was made available 2 weeks later via streaming. It didn't seem to be distributed very well, I don't think, and that's a shame. So, Stephanie, what do you have to say?
Well, I guess if that's all that we want to talk about as far as background, then let's just start getting into talking about it. Sound good?
That sounds great.
Let's get into it.
Awesome. Well, I want to start by saying that I was really thrilled with kind of how I want to talk about just this film. I don't want to get into the second one yet, but I do want to just preface that it was really cool how wildly different the films we picked were. I think it was made it really fun to watch and to have 2 completely different viewing experiences. And I think hopefully it'll be really fun to talk about because of that. I think, just to start, I think immediately with this one, you sort of get that it's going for a little bit more arthouse vibes. It is from IFC Films, which I think generally is a really good sign. Like when I see them, I'm usually pleasantly surprised with whatever they put out.
I agree. I trust them a lot too. I was immediately excited about it when I saw just how well it was photographed, how sort of not devoid of color, but it was just, there were a lot of blacks, blues, greens. And it just looked really smooth. And for this particular movie, I really liked that. And I also liked the way the story started to unfold. It was a wonderful script. It worked perfectly. The acting was great. I don't want to get too far ahead, but
yeah. Well, let's
first things first. It was a great looking movie.
Yeah. I guess let's just start and we'll sort of go through some of the major beats and just talk about what stood out. first of all, I really enjoy when films do what this film did, where it's where you have this cold open, where you sort of immediately get thrown into this really tense situation. So what it
Yeah.
does is basically starting where the film kind of ends and then going backwards. But it works really well because obviously you need a bit of setup and you need a little bit of time to set the stage for what's going to happen. But they start it in such a way that you get a little bit of that sort of intensity and you sort of know about the vibe of the film before they go
Yeah.
back and start saying like, oh, here's where we started. And you meet this, like, I must say, everything in this is everything's very beautiful. It's this very idyllic suburban neighborhood. It's a
Yep.
beautiful sunny day. It's like you said, gorgeously shot. You've got this gorgeous nuclear family of this husband and wife and their teen son and their young daughter. And they really kind of look like they're a family out of a painting. It's just very lovely and serene. And that's really nice because you know shit's going to hit the fan. So for it to start so like, oh, everything is just so beautiful and sunny and peaceful and wonderful, and then to pull the rug out from under them, I think that's a really effective thing.
I could look at that. I can look at this at the introduction in one of two ways, which is either a lot of movies are starting this way now, either with the middle of the story or the end of the story first. And it's getting, I don't know if I should say repetitive, but a lot of movies do that now. And I think a lot of that came from Pulp Fiction. So that's sort of a cynical way to look at it, which I can't help but look at in a certain way. But this time it set up the movie fantastically. It really prepared you. It really shocked you at first with there was just sweat and tears and mucus and blood, and just the characters were just like anguished up to 11. I mean, and it's like you said, it's a really shocking way to start a movie to sort of set you up for how serious it's going to get. And like I said, sometimes that particular trope doesn't work, but it works with this movie for me because it sort of sets up, like I said, the seriousness, the stakes, the intensity of the movie itself, the intensity of the filmmaking.
Yeah, I think it helps. Like, I know it's cliche, but I think it helps because, especially a film like this, where you're going to have a little bit of a slow build and it's going to take you a little bit before you get into like extreme like horror. And so I think so that you don't lose audiences early on and they don't get bored and they're like, oh, this is going to be like a slow kind of dramatic film. I'm not interested. You sort of immediately are like, no, this is going to get intense. So just kind of hang on and be patient and it'll pay off in a really nice way. I thought it was a really smart choice.
Yeah, I agree.
Then after you get your little cold open, I will say, if anybody's going to watch this, that I need to tell you there's a seizure alert for the title screen. The title screen is insane. It's really hard to watch. And I don't have like problems with flashing lights, but if you do, you're gonna want to like pop out, right? Like it only lasts for like a second, but it's a lot. It's a lot of flashing lights on the screen.
Yeah. But I mean, that worked too, because just like the cold open, as you called it, the presentation of the title was another way to shock you.
Yeah, it's very disorienting. It really kind of puts you on edge to start the film. So it's smart.
This was really, it was a really smartly made movie. It was really,
yeah.
It's
a very competent film for sure. And then we get the introduction to the core family, which is who we're going to follow for the majority of the film. And like I said, pretty typical suburban, white bread family. You get the husband and wife, and they're bickering a little bit, but it's nothing serious. It's really just sort of petty married life stuff, like why don't you ever put the dishes away, and why are you such a nag? That kind of BS stuff. You can tell they're just they're sort of grating on each other's nerves, like as married couples do. And she's sort of, getting on to him for not being very present. And he's just kind of whistling. And she says, if I told you the world was ending, you'd still just whistle. And I thought that was like a lovely little bit of ominous foreshadowing. But after you sort of just meet everyone, you get this news segment on the television that says that there's an infectious disease that has been spreading, I believe, at a nursing home. And so they're just like, hey, we're not, and scientists really aren't sure what it is, but we're sort of looking into it. And
It has
then
been established that persons who have recently died are coming back to life and seeking human victims.
none of
Widespread
that.
investigation. I'm sorry.
So then you start to just get really subtle signs. And I really liked how they did this because it is a bit of a slow build. And I don't say that to mean that it's boring. I just mean that they're sort of, they're not throwing you right in the middle of the zombie apocalypse. They're really sort of setting the stage for it.
Well, it makes sense because the shit would hit the fan slowly, like a wave. You know?
And that always really freaks me out when they don't just throw you in the middle of it, but they show sort of how it started. Because it feels like you can imagine yourself in that situation. You can imagine what that would feel like. And especially, this was made before COVID. But now that we've lived through COVID, we understand what that was sort of like at the first early stages of like, hey, something might be wrong. And then all of it went from something might be wrong, but don't worry. And it felt like the next day it was like, everybody stay in your house and don't leave. And the whole world's going to shut down for a little while. And we're like, okay, wow. So this felt very, it resonated quite a bit with me.
There's a magic to making zombie movies. I don't know if it's the pacing or the writing or the vision of the director, the editing, something where an outbreak, the presentation of the outbreak is just so perfect. It's so fluid. And then there's other times when it's just clumsy. Like in it's not immersive, like The Walking Dead. We all love The Walking Dead. At least I did. But it wasn't immersive. It wasn't like, oh, what would I do? What am I going to do? What would they do? Oh my God. It was just like watching a story being told. Whereas in what we become, I felt a little more immersed. I felt like I was there in the house. Like this could really happen to me. Everything with me is about immersion. And I was in that house.
Yeah, I really, not to beat a dead horse, but like, I really like how they ramped things up. It was very tense for me. I was very uncomfortable, and I mean, I was supposed to be. And I was nervous, and I was like anxious and stressed out, and it sort of made me sick to my stomach, but in a good way. That sounds like a bad endorsement, but it was really very effective for me personally.
The color palette, although I praised it, I mean, it's very dark, very gloomy, very grim. And I think that psychologically that contributes to discomfort as well.
You get to a point where sirens start going off, which I always find in films it's subtle things like that, but sirens to me are incredibly terrifying. They give me like Silent Hill vibes. Every time I hear a siren going off, I get very like tense and stressed out. I have a very visceral reaction to sounds in films. And like,
have you?
Go ahead. Sorry. No, go ahead.
Have you heard in the Evil Dead remake, Fede Alvarez had just like part of the whole project. He moved to LA from, I don't know, Spain or something like that. And the one thing that alarmed him more than anything were the sirens, the fire sirens, police sirens. And he incorporated that into the score because he thought that would really ramp up the stress. And I think it did. It wasn't very subliminal because it's like one of the biggest sounds in the movie, like, and I was wondering if it was a chorus or if it was a siren. And apparently it was a siren. Those weren't voices. And that worked a lot.
This isn't really, I mean, you do get a zombie element in the end, but it really isn't a zombie film. It is more of a it's more of a pandemic infection type film. So it works really well with our theme. And it's more about like there's a disease and it's spreading and they don't know what it is. They can't control it. And then it starts to become like a very big threat. And of course, like when you have a threat of this nature, the government steps in, and the government isn't always there to like make you feel, safe and comfortable. They are in this film, like in a lot of films, like the Crazies kind of situation where the government's just as terrifying, if not more so, as the disease itself.
What it took me out of the movie a little bit because these government, I mean, they were beyond the mist and they were beyond like the crazies government people. I mean, these guys were like, they said nothing except get in your houses, get back in your houses. And they were yelling everything very aggressively. They were really eager to shoot people. And I just don't think in real life they would be that brutal. I really don't.
Well, I sort of disagree with you there because I mean, I think in the beginning of the film, you're watching, you're like, Jesus fuck, like this is insanity, right? Like this, it did feel a little over the top, but I think the point of it, which they sort of get to, is that it reveals the extent of the threat. Like they're in a situation where it is like a mass epidemic threat that is incredibly dangerous that needs to be controlled. So they're in a situation where, because, there's that whole part where they think, the teens are like, holy shit, they're like beating people in the streets. And it's like martial law and they're out of control and they're really dangerous. And we get, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but we get this scene where the teen boy, because they get quarantined to their house. They're not allowed to leave. They're barricaded in basically. And if they try to leave, there's like guys at their doors with, guns that are like, get the fuck back in the house. And it's like that level of intensity. And the teen boy sneaks out and he's like doing a, what's the movie, like 28 Weeks Later, where they let the monkeys go in the beginning and they release the contagion into the world. Well, he goes and he tries to release these people that are being hoarded into this van by the military and doesn't realize that they're all contaminated. And that's what sort of like is the beginning of the end.
I like the fact that they didn't spoon feed you with that particular scene. They didn't sort of shoot it and indicate like, look, there he goes. He's going to let all those people out. They just sort of showed him naturally, wandering around in the base, as one usually would. And he thought that he was freeing people.
Yeah.
I believe. Did I interpret that right?
Yeah, no, he was, like I said, he thought that the military is the bad guys and that they're rounding up people who are innocents for no reason. And he doesn't realize like the extent of what's happening, but really they had rounded up people who are infected in an effort to try to control this like rampant disease.
There's just so much miscommunication. I hope that doesn't happen if we ever end up in something like that.
I mean, come on. Like, honestly, and when we talk about, this is the thing now, movies like this, pre-pandemic, I think we had a lot of like, well, that seems far-fetched. But after we went through COVID and we saw our government response to COVID and we saw how badly we handled literally every fucking aspect of it. And thank God, like COVID was a big deal. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not downplaying it. But thank God it wasn't more of a threat than it was because the devastating response to that and how badly we fumbled that is pretty terrifying when you think about it. And you think about, obviously we're not going to have zombies probably, but the idea of us having an infectious plague that could kill a bunch of people is very, very real, obviously. And so you see mistake after mistake after mistake. And instead of me being like, well, that seems far-fetched for a movie, I'm like, yep, that's about how I would expect it to go down.
Oh, that's true. It is very scary. It was but I liked how he, it wasn't really, with suspenseful music or anything. It was just sort of, he just started opening doors. Yeah. And there was just that brief scene where one little hand came out. And you're like, ugh. And he's so romantic and he loves that girl so much. He likes her so much. And all he wants is to just be with her and just do other things with her. And he's such a stupid motherfucker. He's just, kid, just stand back and see what you're doing.
Well,
I mean, he's putting the lives of the entire neighborhood at risk.
He doesn't know that. He doesn't know that. And this is the thing: is like, no, he shouldn't, because he's a teen boy. They don't know shit. They don't know anything, and they think they know everything, and that's a dangerous combination. And I'm not like, look, this is not hateful. Every single one of us was a teen. Every single one of us was fucking stupid as hell. Some of us still are as grown-ups. Listen, this is very realistic. Like teenagers, you cannot tell them anything. And the second you tell them what not to do, what do they want to do? The exact thing you told them not to do. They
but
don't know.
in a life or death
He
situation,
doesn't
such
know
as
it's
this,
life or death, though. He doesn't realize.
why not?
No,
That's dumb.
It's not dumb because nobody. Because first of all, I'm gonna go back to this. This is gonna get a little political, so I'm sorry, but buckle your seatbelt.
No, I don't mind. I like hearing your take on things.
Look, we just again. I'm gonna say two things here. The first thing I'm gonna say is that we just survived a pandemic that we are technically still in, but whatever. And we had a good half the country saying it wasn't even real and that they weren't going to wear masks. That was stupid. And it was a government conspiracy and they were going to do whatever the fuck they wanted to do. And the government couldn't tell them anything differently. All right. And that was a real thing. And it was all over the news. And you had scientists and you had very smart people coming on and saying, look, this is a serious thing. And here's what you need to do to protect yourself. And again, a good half of our country was like, fuck you. And that's what we have to deal with. And that's grown-ups. That is grown-ass people who should know better, right?
Oh, I watch YouTube. I know. Okay. I've seen videos.
So that's point the first. And point the second is, in the movie, in the world of the movie, information was being withheld. They didn't, if you watch like the news clippings and you watch like, they didn't know what the fuck was going on. All they were seeing on the news was like, no, don't worry, it's fine, it's fine. And then all of a sudden there's like people in the, it's like a third world country out in the streets, like a war-torn country. There's like people in full hazmat gear and people in rifles and all their doors are barricaded and they have to be brought supplies and their windows start getting covered up and then they start putting black tarp over houses and they're seeing this shit, but nobody is telling them what is happening and why, even the grown-ups. So to say he should have fucking known, nobody knew what the fuck was going on. And then you take it a step further and you're like, even if the grown-ups did know what was going on, the teens sure as hell didn't know because they aren't watching the news and paying attention. And all he cares about is that he doesn't want to be cooped up in that house and he wants to go see his girlfriend. And that's it. And that's teen boy brain. That's all that matters. So for me, obviously it's not malicious and obviously it's not like if he had known the stakes or what had happened, he wouldn't have done it. But the way it plays out feels really realistic to me. Like, I feel like that's what would happen.
I agree. It was very realistic. The couple, I don't know their names. I'm sorry. The girl, the guy and the girl, and she sort of immediately thought he was infected because he coughed. Her behavior, I found, I don't know, quite appalling.
I don't think it was appalling at all. No. Jamie, first of all.
Oh, no.
I don't know what to say to you because you went through a pandemic just like the rest of us. Like, were you not in a situation, maybe you weren't around people, but if I was I would go to the office, right? At the kind of start of it before we were all like, nobody's going anywhere sort of thing. And I was in rooms where somebody would cough and everybody would be like, oh, well, you got COVID, and everybody would freak out. And it was just like a thing. And that wasn't a zombie apocalypse. That was COVID. You know what I'm saying? Like, but there was this paranoia where it's like, you have to take a step back and realize there is an infectious disease that is spreading like wildfire. And they don't know how it's being spread. They don't know what the fuck it is. They don't know how to stop it. And they're a little concerned, and you've got people, and they start telling you the symptoms, right? They're like, yeah, it's gonna start with a cough, and then you're with somebody, and they start coughing. You're immediately gonna be like, oh shit, do you have the thing?
He's not some guy in an office with her. He's not some goof in a grocery store.
Well, she wasn't like
her family, her husband.
She wasn't like, get the fuck out of my house. She just scooted over.
It took a while for that to happen, but it did happen, sort of.
She just shifted a little. Listen. It's crazy to me that the things that you react to, where you're like, well, that's fucked up. I'm like, no, it's not. People, even loved ones, even something like the flu, if the flu's going around and you're worried about getting it, if somebody starts coughing, that's a normal thing. You're like, oh, get away from me. Like, it's not, you don't say it in a cruel, hateful way, but you are a little bit like, don't cough on me. I don't want the fucking flu. I don't want COVID. I don't want whatever you've got.
Okay, let me interject. She was damn right panicky. in an aggressive way.
She was
And
not.
that was hurt. That was
What
hurtful.
movie did you watch? What movie did you? Okay, he coughed on the couch. She was sitting next to him. She kind of gave him a look, and she subtly scooted a couple of inches to the left of him. How is that aggressive and panicky?
I'm talking
Oh
about
my
the
God.
shit. I'm talking about the shit attack she has after all that.
When?
Hello?
What? Yeah,
Yes.
I need more details. I need you to explain more.
She just sort of was like, get away from me. Oh my God, you have it. And he's like, no, please, no. And he's like, I don't know. You're fuck me. You're right. I mean,
well, at a certain point, they all start losing their shit and panicking because it's a terrifying situation. I mean, she does start panicking when they start like boarding up the house and being like, you can't fucking leave. And she starts to have like a visceral reaction to that. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then when she drives away, she just abandons him and drives away.
Well, first of all, he wasn't that great of a dude, let's be honest. And I don't know that they were married.
She supposedly loved him, didn't she?
I don't know. I mean,
see, we have different ways of thinking about certain things, and it's actually fun. But
well, I'm just saying, like, he was pretty much a dick, and she was having a panic attack, and I kind of think you have to give people allowances in a state of extreme terror like that, where you are like freaking out. You're like, what the fuck is happening? Because honestly, like, I'm just watching this movie and I'm very stressed out. I'm very like ramped up and anxious and uncomfortable. I try to imagine when I'm watching it, like, what would that be like in real life? Like, what would that actually? Because you know what, we were quarantined during COVID
for a while, yeah,
for a pretty long while, and I'm
just saying, yeah, we were.
Okay, I personally was pretty totes fine with it because I'm an introvert and I I had plenty of things to keep me busy, plenty of like work to do, and I didn't lose my shit. But I knew plenty of people who were losing their fucking minds during quarantine because they're extroverts. They need to be out in the world. They were stifled, they were bored, they were lonely, they were all these things. And it took a real serious psychological toll on them. And that was just the government saying, hey, it's really best if you stay inside. Now, take that situation and imagine this isn't the government just saying like, hey, we really think you should do this because it's the right thing to do. This is the government coming and boarding up your house and standing outside your door with semi-automatic rifles. Yeah. And when you try to fucking open your door, they scream at you and they say, get the fuck back in the house. Like that level of terror is, on a magnitude that I don't think we can comprehend. So I don't think people handling a situation badly, I think you got to make allowances for it because who the hell knows how any of us would handle a situation like that? You aren't thinking clearly. You aren't doing what you would normally do when you're not under extreme duress. You know what I'm saying? Sweet.
I don't disagree. I just, it's funny. Our disagreement about this is just interesting because it's like a microcosm of what would really happen in real life if there was like a zombie level attack. Because we're sort of like, no, they should do this. No, he should have done that, and like multiply that by a billion, and I can see why people go nutty.
I get a little like defensive isn't the word because you're not attacking me, but
I'm not.
No, I know. That's what I just said. That is what I just fucking said.
Okay.
You're not attacking me. That's why I said defensive is the wrong word. But I'm not sure the word I'm looking for. But I get sort of. I get. I'm a little bit of an apologist, I guess is the right word. In that, like, when
For
people.
what?
I'm going to fucking tell you if you would like to let me finish. I will tell you what I'm talking about. When people, like, let's say somebody's going through a grief situation. And then someone will say, I really don't think you're handling your grief well. Or shouldn't you stop moping now? Or shouldn't you be over it by now? Or, you know what would maybe help is if you would stop laying around the house moping and you would just get out and get into the world. You know, people and all those people that have ideas about how you should handle your grief are well-intentioned. You know, they have good intentions. They're well-meaning. They aren't trying to be total assholes. But you should never, ever tell anyone how they should deal with a situation when they're under duress. Because one, you don't know how you're actually going to deal with it because we don't actually handle things the way we think we would most of the time. And two, all of us are different and we're all like differently equipped to handle things. And so if somebody is spiraling in a way that you think is not appropriate, and I'm not saying you, and I'm not being judgmental towards you. I'm just saying in general, like in general. I get defensive of people who are going through it and who do something where you're like, well, that's not what I would do. That's fucked up. I'm just like, hey, I don't know that any of us know what we would do. And also like some of us are going to be really fucked up in that situation because we can't handle stress well. And so we lose our minds, and it's easy to judge from a distance, but when you're in the thick of the chaos, you know, I think a lot of us, and again, I'm just saying, like, I think a lot of us had really bad reactions to COVID. I'm imagining plenty of us would have a very bad reaction to this situation because it's about 100 times worse than COVID, you know?
I like this. This is why horror movies are so great. Could we have this conversation about pretty much, I'm kind of a blanket statement, but could we have this conversation about any other kind of movie in any other genre besides horror, sci-fi, fantasy? We are so lucky that we get to have movies like this.
Yeah. Although, Jamie, I think you and I could probably fight about just about anything, so.
No, we can't. Oh, I'm sorry. I had to do that.
What? I know we sort of like went down a rabbit hole. Speaking of, there is an adorable little rabbit in this movie, and it's really
the rabbit.
It's really unfortunate and really cruel of them to. First of all, two things. First of all, fuck these filmmakers, okay? Because that little girl is about the cutest little girl that I've ever seen in my life.
Yes.
And I was very the parents, the couples, the adults in the situation. I don't fucking care. Whatever. The teen son, I wasn't really that like invested in, but that sweet little girl, I was like, you precious angel. And of course they fuck with her. And then she's got this adorable, like the cutest little white fluffy bunny I've ever seen in my whole God-given life. And they fuck with the bunny, and it's really messed up. They really know how to emotionally manipulate the viewer in a way that is cruel and unusual punishment.
That's called talented filmmaking. It's
brutal, but it's very effective, and it's very well done. And there's some scenes that in this film where I was really like gut punched, in a good way. You know, like it's a really effective little nasty little film.
The ending, I don't know if how detailed we're gonna get about the ending. I meant like the very ending, the last thing we see.
We can absolutely, if we're ready. Well, first of all, take a break for a second, because if we're ready, we can absolutely talk about the ending and we can spoil it. But I will just give a spoiler alert. I'll just give a little alert and say, hey, we're about to spoil this film, just in case you don't want to know.
Attention, listeners. We're about to spoil the ending. You've been warned.
So go ahead.
Oh, okay. I was hoping that the ending would have ended, I don't know, would have ended differently. Like, I don't mean with the family. So we're in spoiler territory here. So the whole wraparound bookcase of this thing is the mother is holding the daughter. She's pretty much dead, but I mean, it's kind of like a situation where she's waiting for the kid to jump up and she doesn't want anyone to touch her until she comes back to life. And the father is right there with the rifle, and he's upset, of course, but he's just like, we have to do this. We have to do this. And she doesn't let him, and sad things happen and no one's alive. But the very last second of the movie is a large, like spacious view of the town and all the outlying areas, the mountains, and there's just fires everywhere. And there's just like a subtle ring of what sounds like a bomb. And it gets louder and louder and louder and louder. And then all of a sudden you get the flashing again. What we become, what we become. In a zombie movie, I don't really think there is a better way to end it than that way. But I was just like, man, I wish they surprised me somehow. I don't know how, but somehow. But it was a good ending.
I hear you. I truly love the ending because I'll tell you why. You didn't ask, but I'm gonna tell you. It was no, I'm just kidding. It was really sort of. I mean, I knew it was gonna happen, and obviously they telegraph it because they start the film with the ending, so you know essentially, you don't know exactly, but you know essentially where we're going.
Yeah, it's gonna be a mess.
You know, it's one of those films where there's no happy ending, right? And it was really emotionally devastating. I thought the mom was extraordinary, like the level of like grief and her reaction. You know, he was basically, and he was right. Like, let me preface it to say he was right to say we've got to shoot the daughter.
Yeah.
But also, I completely empathize with the mom, and I would not want him to shoot her either. And I would, as you know, imagining that situation, I can imagine being like, I would rather die at the hands of my like zombie daughter than sit here and watch you put a bullet in her head. You know, like as a mom, you're just, and this is what I think, this is one thing about this film that I did want to bring up. I think a lot of times, and you know, when you watch like Walking Dead type stuff or any sort of zombie films, I think we have this tendency to be like, and it's not real, but there is this sort of like glamorization of it where you're like, bring on the zombie apocalypse, you know, like I could survive a zombie apocalypse. It'd be badass. I wouldn't have to go to work. I wouldn't have to do this. I could, you know, like you sort of create this little fantasy about how like fucking cool it would be to be in like Mad Max post-apocalyptic world.
I'm going to put on my electric tape from like in Train to Busan and
you're going to shoot guns. You're going to be a badass, you know. You like look all buff in a tank top. It's going to be a real like good time.
But you're right.
A film like this does a very good job of being like, you know what? In real life, this would suck on a level that you can't even begin to imagine. And the terror and the worst part of it, obviously, is that like you're going to have to watch people you love die in horrible ways. And that's the kind of like gravitas that hits really hard where you realize you know, it's all fun and games until it's like really real. And you're sitting there holding your like beautiful, sweet, adorable little daughter in your hands. And your husband's like, I need to blow her brains out. And you're just like, I don't know. It was a very devastating scene for me. I thought it was very well handled and I loved it. And I loved how like, it's so bleak. There's no hope in sight. There's no glimmer of like, maybe it'll be okay. Or maybe like a couple people will survive or whatever. It was just like, no, this is fucking world ending and it's game over. And that's a brave thing to do because people, they expect and crave a little bit of a happy ending, and there is no happy ending in sight with this bad boy.
With that last thought you had, I thought you were going to go to again, The Walking Dead or Dawn of the Dead, because these are all movies where they're realistic, I guess, to a certain extent, but all the characters are just unfucking touchable. They're not vulnerable. Whereas the characters in What We Become, you know, they just have their regular home clothes on. They do seem like just the way, I don't know if it's the lighting or the way the performances were, they do seem like babes in the woods, like totally exposed, totally vulnerable to everything.
Here's the thing. It's like, I mean, I love Walking Dead and I love that kind of stuff. And I love,
so do I.
I love like the sort of, we're almost like superheroes kind of aspect. But at the same time, 99% of us are not prepared for a zombie apocalypse, like a real one.
No.
And we would just be, I mean, I say this all the time, like, I'll say like, oh yeah, zombie apocalypse, cool, like bring it on. But in the same breath, I'm like, I'm not going to survive a zombie apocalypse. I'm not going to survive for more than like the first hour of the zombie apocalypse. I'm going to be done for. It's just and honestly, I want to be done for because I don't want to. I really don't want to survive in the world that they have to live in once, once the initial threat is like all the people that are going to die in the first wave are done, and then it's a matter of like. You have to deal with things like, do we have enough food to eat? And how do we survive? How do we just survive basic, forget zombies. How do you just like, continue to sustain yourself? That's just fucked up. I'm really very excited about that.
I just don't want to die being eaten alive.
It's not my ideal way to go. Like, I'm not saying like, yes, that would be fantastic. But I feel like there are worse ways to go than being eaten by a zombie.
Wow.
What?
I want to have an episode one time just to debate that, because that's just fascinating. What do you think would be a worse way? There's so many horrible ways to die.
I can think of a million worse ways. Okay. Jamie, as much horror as you have watched, any kind of prolonged agony, I'm not a fan of. Like torture films, these torture films fuck me up because they'll do this thing where they torture someone for a very long time and then in the end they kill them. And I'm like, that's
anticlimactic. That
to me is the worst because it's like you go through all this suffering only to die in the end. Burning alive, I think is one of my number one absolute worst ways. Starving to death is pretty brutal. And that's another thing you actually do have to worry about in a zombie apocalypse is like, if you just don't have food or water and just withering away, that seems worse than getting eaten by a zombie. Drowning is pretty horrible to me. Yeah, there's a lot, Jamie. Really,
those are worse than being eaten.
Honestly, things that there's a whole lot of anticipation of the death are pretty awful. Yeah. Like, I don't want to know death is coming, really. I want it to sort of sneak up on me, get me, and then I'm gone really quickly. That's sort of it's everyone's dream, I guess. But, things in a situation where I always think about situations, this is going to derail us a little bit, but where you have a pretty good idea that you're going to die, but it takes a while before the death actually happens. And you just have to sit there with the terror of the like, oh my God, I'm going to die. That is probably the thing that scares me more than anything in the world. Like when I hear of situations, this is really bleak, but for example, something like 9/11, where it's like, how much terror people went through before they actually died. And that is not okay.
Seeing those people jump out of those windows.
Yes.
That's
not okay.
No.
So
no, not okay at all.
Again, worse ways to. Getting eaten by zombies not great. Don't get me wrong, but way worse ways to go. If you're gonna pin me down.
You haven't seen Day of the Dead very much, have you?
I've seen it. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, look. I know it's. I know. Yeah. It's not. Again, me saying there's worse ways to go isn't the same thing as me being like, I would love to get eaten by a zombie. Like that would be super fun in games, Like I don't want to get eaten by a zombie. I don't really want to get eaten by anything.
I always go back as far as painful zombie deaths go. Well, there's tons of them, but for some reason, while we're talking about this, I'm thinking about the heavyweight character who was in season 2 of The Walking Dead. And he went with, sheriff adulterer guy to do something or get something. And it was like one or the other. And he like totally sacrificed the fat guy and that poor guy. Yeah, I feel bad about that. I don't know where that came from.
We've really gone off the rails as per.
See, this is what I mean. This is what I mean by like fun, like keep this stuff because it's fun to listen to.
We got to do our thing, our normal thing. And I'm going to ask if this film is an infectious delight or a plague upon viewers. What say you?
I say it is an infectious delight.
I agree.
Don't just check this out. Go.
It's great,
intentionally watch this.
Yeah. It's like, I'm so proud of us because I honestly, when we started this show, I thought a good 95% of the stuff we'd watch was going to be absolute garbage. And that would be fun to talk about, but it wouldn't be great to watch. And we're actually like picking really good films, which I don't know if that's good or bad for the podcast, but I really enjoyed watching this.
When we eventually, I mean, I don't think we've even run into one that we both think is junk. But when we do, we're liable to have a really hoot and holler of a time, talking about it.
There is, oh my God. We have another film to talk about.
Do we ever?
So for this one, I picked 3 films that I wanted you to choose from.
Yes.
And the films that I picked are 2006 MAD COWGIRL, about a woman who begins a surreal journey after finding out she's dying of a brain disorder. 2012's From Beneath, about a man who gets bitten by a strange organism while on vacation with his girlfriend. And 2015's Summer Camp, about a plague that breaks out at a European summer camp. And Jamie, which one did you pick and why?
Stephanie, you predicted that I would choose MAD COWGIRL, and you were absolutely right. I loved the trauma-esque toxic yellow and red and orange cover. It was it didn't explain anything, the cover, yet it still said you're in for a wild fucking ride. And I chose that absolutely.
So MAD COWGIRL is a low-budget film by Gregory Hatanaka, is I believe how you pronounce that, who, this is super interesting. He dedicated the movie to a woman named Doris Wishman, who... Doris
filmmaker.
Wishman, who directed 1960s sexploitation films, such as Diary of a Nudist, Behind the Nudist Curtain, and Bad Girls Go to Hell.
Yeah, I have Bad Girls Go to Hell.
He also dedicated it to a filmmaker who I really love, John Cassavetes, who's widely regarded as one of the most daring and influential filmmakers of the 20th century. So that's a really interesting couple of people to dedicate a film like this to.
I have only seen had any exposure to John Cassavetes through Rosemary's Baby, but I've heard he's just like a spectacular talent.
MAD COWGIRL received a limited release in major cities such as New York City and Seattle, and it was released on DVD in December 2006. It had an estimated budget of only $350,000.
Let's get into it.
So, do you care if I start off with a little something before we sort of get into this proper?
You can take the torch with this one. I don't mind what you start out with, because this was just one of our crazy ones. One of the crazy ones.
Yeah, it's super nutty. But what I wanted to start with is that this one has this insanely polarizing Rotten Tomatoes score.
Oh, yeah?
So it's got a 33% from critics. But there are only 12 critical reviews, and it's interesting because most of the reviews for this film, the websites no longer exist. So it seemed like when we're talking about critics, we're talking about the sort of smaller, more obscure critics. But on the audience score, which this is really fascinating, it had an 89% with more than 500 ratings. So that's very different than I would have expected, honestly. And it's crazy because the critics didn't want to touch this with a 10-foot pole, but it seems like it has a pretty big cult following and a lot of like user reviews and a lot of affection from the audience. I will say, go ahead.
Sorry, when you say 500, do you mean 500 people voted, or
yes,
is that just like a numeric average?
No, 500 different reviews. The 89% is the average rating.
Okay.
So the reviews for this, the ones that I could find, are honestly some of the most spectacular that I've ever read.
Really?
And it really tells you something about the sort of hallucinogenic trip that we're about to embark on. Okay, so the first one is a film distributor turned filmmaker of dubious merit. Director and co-writer Gregory Hatanakis eagerly caters to those who think film history begins with Quentin Tarantino and ends with Takashi Miike. It will appeal primarily to 20-something psychos in training and women who hate men. This one is actually pretty funny. It says, Mad Cowgirl is either brilliant or awful. I honestly don't know which. 5 stars, ? 1 star, ? I can't give it an average of 3 because on this site that means just average. And this movie it rips the molars out of average and fucks the tooth sockets. 4 stars then. I don't know, man. I just work here.
The one you just read? That should have gone on the box.
No, actually, that's a pretty brilliant description. Okay, here's some more.
Okay.
This indulgently puerile waste of time plows ahead with pointless mayhem masquerading as, air quotes, art. Endlessly entertaining, though not recommended for anyone uncomfortable with soft porn, eroticized violence, or graphically depicted slaughter. Slick and often incomprehensible, it certainly gives you your money's worth if blood, gore, and blasphemy are what you're buying.
What did you suspect at first? I was sort of suspicious.
I thought it was going to be garbage. Yeah.
I thought it was going to be like a rape revenge movie with kung fu, which
it kind of is a little.
It kind of is.
I mean, it's got that vibe. It's definitely got a which is why you get the Quentin Tarantino reference. She's definitely kind of the bride, the Kill Bill bride at the end.
Yeah. It makes a lot of statements. The movie, I mean, and it makes them very cleverly, I think. Sort of it is sort of an anti-meat movie, or at least it's a movie that makes fun of the eroticism of meat, or at least the meat in Mad Cowgirl was just like, it was meat porn.
Well, here's what I got out of it. I didn't really find it to be anti-meat. I thought that was really just a vehicle. I really feel like, yeah, I feel like this was about forbidden flesh. I thought they were sort of making, because she's also very addicted to sex, and she has a lot of questionable sex with very questionable men, including her priest, who is, first of all, skeevy as hell. Second of all, like, what the fuck? Like, this is a very attractive girl, and this priest guy is very creepy and weird and uncomfortable and all this shit.
And he's torn. He, like, sometimes he talks to her and talks to her on his on her voicemail. He's just like full of love and revelation and like, you are the most wonderful thing in my life. And there's other times where the exact same person is saying like, we're disgusting, you're a slut, you're horrible, I can't believe you.
Well,
and
there's
he just
a lot
sort of bounces.
There's a lot of like toxic masculinity in this, and this is a very like feminist film in that the men are very disgusting and very manipulative and very abusive, and that's sort of where the revenge aspect comes in, is that she's sort of getting revenge on these men that have wronged her. So it's not necessarily rape revenge, but it is like revenge on this toxic masculinity. Now the reason that I think the meat is like a parallel of like, she craves things that are bad for her, and that's sort of like a sort of self-abusive kind of thing that a lot of people have, where they don't feel good about themselves, so that they don't really think they deserve better, so they sort of go after, and this is all a lot of very subconscious level.
But I mean, a lot of this meat isn't even prepared. It's just raw meat. And she doesn't use utensils. She just digs into it.
Yeah, but it's a metaphor for, like, again, it's like, it's forbidden flesh. It's a metaphor for her, like, craving these. She's trying to, like, fill a void, you know what I mean? And she's doing it through sex, and she's doing it through this consumption of meat. And that really is just I do think that the meat aspect is a metaphor for the real shit that's happening. And this film, like, speaking of real shit, this film does this thing where you have no idea what is real and what is not real. You don't know what's in her head. You don't know if she actually has mad cow disease. You don't know if she's actually losing her mind. You don't know if she's hallucinating, fantasizing all this. You don't know if the things that you're seeing are legitimately happening. You don't know if things are a metaphor. Like nothing. It's so surreal, and it plays out in such a like, it feels
Fever dream.
Yes, thank you. It's very, nothing feels like it's really happening, and you actually have no idea what is really happening, which makes it very interesting and fun and cool, but also makes it a little bit hard to extrapolate because
It's
you're
confusing.
like, maybe none of this is happening, maybe all of it's happening. Who the fuck knows, honestly.
I think the scenes in the meat plant, the meat slaughtering plant, I think those were real. I can put money on that, but the rest of it, I don't know. Like the black priest that replaced her adulterous priest friend, like his whole performance was very surreal, and he sort of sank into yet another guy that wanted to have sex with her, and it was just it seemed like a fever dream. Like, I don't think he was really doing that. I think she was imagining him being just another guy who just wants to get in my pants, and he's a priest, so that means he's really just wants to get in my pants. You know, I don't.
I feel like this film, I feel like to say, well, I think if we try to be like, okay, this part's real, this part's not real, like we could do that exercise, but I think it's all hypothetical. I feel like it's very much like, this is a bit of a controversial statement, but given that this film is so sort of, one thing it does skewer is religion and the hypocrisy of religion.
Yummy.
Given that, I think this is a good analogy to say, it's like when people cherry pick the Bible and they're like, well, I mean, clearly Noah's Ark, that whole thing, that's a parable. That didn't really happen. But Adam and Eve did happen. That's real. This part, no, that's exaggerated. That's a metaphor. That's allegory. But, yes, Jesus did die and he did resurrect and he is a zombie. Like, you know what I mean? It's like they pick and choose things and none of it makes any sense really. And I feel like it's a crazy thing where it's like, well, if you've already decided that some of it isn't real, how do you, as the interpreter, know how to determine? There's no signpost to tell you like, this is the real thing, this is the fake thing, this is the parable, this really happened, this is historical. Everything people take out of that is a personal interpretation based on nothing other than what makes them sort of feel good, what resonates, because there's no other factual information to go on. And this is the same sort of situation with this film. It's like, whatever we are going to interpret is an interpretation. It is not something that we can actually know or understand.
One of the many things that I can criticize religion for is it gives people the permission to do anything, as long as they turn it back around to religion, to the Bible. Well, the Bible says, this or that. There were a few occasions in the movie where, let's just say also that Walter Koenig is the guy who plays the naughty priest, Mr. Chekhov. Anton Chekhov. Okay. He quoted the Bible a few times, and it was just so hypocritical because he'd go from these just like huge soliloquies about morality and everything, and then he'd call her like a couple minutes later and he'd be like, I think I figured it out. Can I come over now, please? He's fucking with her. They were all fucking with her. Or then again, I mean, maybe she imagined them all fucking with her.
I mean, I think. And
I have another question. I forgot what I was going to say. Shit. It's all right. It wasn't important. I know what I was going to say. I was going to say now does she have brain cancer and mad cow disease, or is one confused with the other? Or
no, mad cow disease is a disease that affects your brain. So
okay, so that's where the brain. Okay,
she's supposed to have mad cow disease, but again, I don't know if she does or if that's just a metaphor, if that's all in her head, or like. And I don't think it matters what's real or not, because this isn't a movie that is about telling a narrative story. This is a movie that is about making commentary, and also is just a, well, it's got some, I don't want to say it doesn't have depth, because I think it does have some depth. I think it has some interesting things to say, but it also is like very much a like tribute to Hong Kong martial art movies, a tribute to like you can definitely feel the influences. We talked about it being dedicated to an erotic filmmaker, and there's a lot of that sort of woven into this. There's a lot of there is a lot of talk about like what's forbidden and what's sinful and what's like, moral and immoral, and how we make those judgments and how sort of hypocritical we are about it. And there's like really interesting things about that union of sex and violence that dichotomy is so interesting, especially in America, about how we view violence as being mostly totally fine, but sex is really like dirty and gross and sinful. And there's that really interesting, and she really, like, I think that's a very pointed thing. Like, she is very shamed for being very sexual like that. She's really considered there's something wrong with you, which is why I'm not really sure she has anything actually wrong with her, or if it is just a metaphor for like people thinking that she's diseased and impure and bad because of her sexual proclivities. But there's a really interesting scene where she goes to a movie theater and they have like a split screen, and on one half there's a martial arts movie and on the other half there's a porno, and they're like, which one do you want? And you can like watch both of them at the same time. I think that's a really fascinating. I love that scene, and I think it's got a lot of commentary happening in it.
Back to what I was saying about if what's real and what isn't. I think the ending. No, I won't get into that yet. But the conclusion, the ending solution that she has, I think that's all very real. I think she did that. She had those movies in mind. She was like, this is going to be my inspiration now. I'm going to, I'm going to go get them. And I think she used the Kung Fu movies as inspiration. And that I do think is real. See,
that's interesting, because I feel like that plays as the most, that to me, the ending played as the most surreal fantasy, not real, than anything else in the film.
But it seems kind of like the logical end to what was going on in her life. If she was driven mad by mad,
I don't know if that's a logical end. Like, it's
within the story.
Yeah, I don't know.
If you were living in her, if you were her, would you propel yourself in that direction? I mean, don't forget now, she is insane.
I would fantasize about it, but would I do it? No. I mean,
that's what makes you Stephanie in that a movie.
Yeah, but I would. I mean, it plays out like an unhinged fantasy. That's why I'm not sure if it's real, because it is the kind of thing that you would fantasize about. And the reason I say that, well, and look, this is a film that I don't know how careful we need to be with spoilers, because it's hard to spoil because it isn't a narrative. So it's just an experience. Like, the film is an experience. And even if I told you everything that happened from start to finish, you are still going to have an insane experience watching this film because of the way that it's executed. But I'll say this. The reason why I think it's hinted at that. Now, did she, and I think it's okay to say she kills people, because that's sort of like that's sort of the point of this film, is that it's a revenge story, where she goes crazy and she kills a bunch of people. I think that she might kill people, but does she do it in the way that we're seeing it play out? That seems unlikely, just because it is so fantastical and it is based on movies she's seen. So I think she's imagining herself in this, like, as this badass martial artist, because she loves those kind of films.
Oh my God. You're right about something you mentioned before about flesh, because like meat is like the theme of this entire movie.
Yeah.
And like there's media, there's like television shows, there's the sermons that Chekhov does. They're all about like meat. If you eat meat, it's like the most horrible thing ever. It's just poison. It's just toxic. Don't eat meat. It's a sin. But there's other times, usually from him, he's saying, "Oh, this is wonderful. Eat meat. It's the most wonderful thing." Everything, like every ethical decision in this movie, is based around eat meat or not meat, or not to eat meat.
And again, I think it's flesh, and I think
Yes,
if you
you're
think
right.
of that,
Yes.
I think it's a metaphor. It's a metaphor for sex, like the meat. I don't think the
Yeah.
meat is. I don't think there's any. That's what I'm saying. I mean, I know in the film it feels like there's commentary on meat, but I don't think the filmmaker is actually making commentary on meat. I think it's a commentary on the way we view sexuality, especially female sexuality. For such a gonzo film,
Good word.
thank you. The notes that I wrote down are actually pretty heady and pretty like, oh, I actually think there's some things, some really powerful things being said in this really crazy ass film. If you kind of take the time to process it that way. And you don't have to. Like, I think this is a film, and we've talked about this before, where you can watch it and you can have a balls to the wall, insanely good time and not give a shit about any of the messages and not take anything serious away from it. But I do think if you're somebody who likes a little bit of depth, then there's plenty of smart stuff in this.
Yes, you have to dig for it.
Underneath all the bananasness of it. But one of the things I wrote is like, I think she craves nourishment for the body and the soul, but both are tainted. And then in parentheses, it's like food and sex. It's like she is, again, trying to fill this void in her life, and she's trying to like nourish herself, but everything she consumes, relationships, food, any of that is tainted, and it's actually making her sick. It's making her, mentally ill. It's making her emotionally ill. It's making her physically ill. Because nothing is pure and everything is tainted. And most of that is a going back to her relationship to men and to how she's been, abused and treated. Go ahead.
Her relationship with her brother is very strange. I'd like to hear your take on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously, it's, incestuous and uncomfortable and inappropriate.
Do you think that we were witnessing the first time they ever had a sexual encounter? Because it seemed like it to me. You don't think so? No?
No, I think it reads as, I mean, maybe, I don't know. To your point, like, I think that there's been, let's say this. I feel like for a while, they've had there's been an ickiness between, like an awkwardness.
Yes.
They're a little too close. Now, if they ever had sex before, if that was the first time they consummated this weirdness, unclear. But I don't think it's the first time there's been this vibe of we're a little closer than we probably should be. Like, there is an onslaught of violence and male aggression. And I really do think there is a lot being said here about, how women are treated and the things that they have to deal with. And, everything's over the top. Like you talked about the doctor she's going to, who is like, oh, you might have a brain tumor, like something's wrong. He doesn't know it's mad cow at the time, but he's like, there's something seriously wrong. And it's obviously a very serious, intense, like, situation. And then he's like, so maybe we can get some dinner sometime. Like, he's like totally fucking hitting on her. And it's like, that's the thing. Like, this film is very exaggeratory in that every man, all the men are not just problematic, but they're extremely problematic to the point of cartoonish. But it is, I think it does have something important to say about, her not feeling safe anywhere. Like, she's not safe with her family. She's not safe with her doctor. She's not safe with her priest. Anybody that is supposed to protect you and care for you and be a safe place to land is toxic and horrible and problematic in this film. And that is, that's really dark and twisted and fucked up. So underneath all the like crazy, silly, goofy, insane visuals and everything that's happening, there is that sort of dark undertone. One of the things that really got to me was when the priest is like, so he, he's with her, like you talked about this, he's with her and then he shuns her. He's like, get away from me. And then he like wants, after he does that, then he wants her again. And then she doesn't want him. He first does the thing where like, I love you. I'm so sorry. I was wrong. I miss you. And then she's like, no, you're no good for me. This isn't good. And then he is like, then immediately he goes from, I love you, I need you, to like, you bitch, Yeah. And he's like, I need you to be with me, you bitch. And it's that like thing that men do so much where they're like, hey, baby. And then you're like, no, thanks. And they're like, oh, you stuck up bitch. And it's just like, okay. Immediately you go from being like this object of desire to this like, the most disgusting, horrible creature on the planet. And it's
thank you, sir. You've completely changed my mind.
Yeah, it's like
bitch.
It's like the rage and the entitlement. It's like it's a very incel behavior, right? It's like, I'm entitled to love from you, and if you don't give it to me, then you're the problem. Like, you're the fucking worst. You're not treating me with respect. You're not giving me what I deserve, and therefore you are, scum of the earth. And that's such a huge problem and so perpetuated in like society. And I thought that that's actually really creepy and unsettling to me.
Yeah. I actually think though that way of thinking is dying a slow death.
Oh, I don't know.
I do.
I mean, I hope you're right, but it's if it's slow, it's very slow.
The social changes over the past 5 or 10 years they're going to hit. They already do, but they're going to have such an earth-shattering impact.
I guess. I mean,
Do you disagree with my optimism?
No, I mean, I do think socially and politically, the pendulum always swings. And it's like we'll go through a period of, heavy conservatism, where there's a lot of like repression and oppression and backwards thinking and bad laws and all kinds of shit. And then we'll have a reaction to that and we'll get very liberal and very progressive and it'll be very exciting and hopeful. And we just went through this very progressive, hopeful time period. And now we're doing the thing where pendulum is swinging because we were so progressive for so long and it was very exciting. People freaked out and they're like, oh my God, progress. And now we need to go backwards and we need to like start unwinding all these laws and we need to go back to where it was like 50 years ago. And the thing is that the reason I get depressed about that is it's like,
yeah,
it's hard to be hopeful because you're like, everything, it feels like there's always a backlash against progress. And it feels like progress is so hard and so long. And it's just like, I want it faster and better. And I want it to be, I want to be progressively progressive. Like, I don't want to like take one step forward and 2 steps back always, which is what we always kind of seem to do. The only hope we have is that like younger, smarter, better people will.
That's what I mean. That's what I'm talking about.
But sure. And I agree with that. Like, I think that, the children of their future, let them lead the way. But also, I think that they have parents who are bigots and they've been indoctrinated into hatred and bigotry and stuff. So it's not like it just goes away when all the old people die. Like this is generational,
I still think it's going to change eventually. I'm not putting a time date. I'm not putting a time limit on it. Like, it could take centuries. I don't know. Well, maybe not centuries, but several decades. But I do think that things are going to get better.
Anyway, I have no fucking idea where we were at or what we
were pretty much done with it. We were talking about James Duvall and toxic masculinity.
Let me say this.
Okay.
I don't think spoilers really apply here, but I do think that the last 10 minutes of this film is some of the greatest minutes of cinema that I have ever seen.
Please clarify.
She goes and dispatches all of these toxic men in her life. And there's this like epic, very Kill Bill-esque fight scene, or like it sort of had a vibe of Scott Pilgrim where it's just this like
Yeah.
kind of cartoon, comical, over the top, like going and like taking out all these bad guys. And there's this rap song that plays that's Master of the Flying Guillotine, which is pretty
Yeah.
great. And it's all this like homage to like 70s Hong Kong films. And I just feel like it's so fun and it's so epic and it's so entertaining. I loved every second of it. I mean, it's unhinged, it's off the rails, but it's wildly fun to me. And I think you do have to, I think if you're going to enjoy this film, you know, you definitely need to like sort of gonzo cinema, and it's very grindhousey. You sort of have to have an affinity for that kind of thing. If you do love martial arts films, I think you're really gonna. This is obviously a very much a love letter to those kind of films, and I think it's incredibly fun. Go ahead, sorry.
I would say it's not a martial arts movie, but it is definitely a movie about martial arts.
Yeah, I mean the character is obsessed with martial arts.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And it's a very big part of her life, and she's like really obsessed. Like this TV show is about this like girl who's like ass kicking, you know, martial artist who like takes out all these bad guys, and she sort of imagines that she is her, and has this sort of fantasy relationship with it.
That show was hilarious. That was fake. I mean, the filmmakers obviously made that.
Well, there really is a show. There really is a movie that is the girl with a thunderbolt kick, but they like Cynthia
Rothrock. They
did this like sort of Americanized, like they turned it into a television show with this like white blonde girl, but it's like inspired by a real like martial arts movie that I haven't seen, but I know. And also she talks about the 10 tigers from Kwenyang or whatever.
Yeah.
That's a movie as well. That's a famous martial arts movie. So the references that are in it are like rooted in reality, but they're just like altered for this universe. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well.
But okay. Well, it sounds like we're just sort of running out of steam on talking about this one, which is fine. So I guess we will just do our conclusion. And we will decide if we think that this is a rare treat or tainted meat. Do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
I think it's a tainted meat.
You think it's tainted meat?
Treat. It's a tainted treat.
So it's like half and half? Is it a rare treat or a tainted treat?
It's a tainted rare treat. It's a rare treat. It's a treat.
It's thumbs up for you?
What? Yes.
Okay, Jesus Christ.
I have a problem with thumbs up and thumbs down. It's good. It's just extremely. People like us will love it. I hate to be elitist, but let's just be honest here. People like us will love it.
I don't think that's elitist.
People who sort of like, you know, verse, chorus, verse, A, B, C, plot, storytelling. They might have a problem with it. Unless they feel open-minded that day.
If you say people like us is elitist, that implies that we are somehow better. And I would not say that liking this film makes you better. I just think it makes you a little bit more eccentric. I think it makes you weirder.
I think it makes you smarter.
That's a bold statement, Jamie.
We found an hour's worth of discussion about this movie that even the makers of the movie probably forgot about by now. So I think we're special. I absolutely do.
I'm not co-signing on this. This is Jamie. This is all Jamie. This is not endorsed by this podcast. This is his personal opinion.
Aren't you the one that's been accused of being an elitist in the past?
Yeah, no, I am an elitist, but
yeah. We're cool because we like this movie and we can talk about it. We're fucking awesome. Face it.
It's because I like the real cerebral art house films.
Yeah.
And when people are like, it's dumb, it's boring, then I'm like, you're dumb and boring. And then I get accused of being an elitist, but whatevs.
Well, I'll stick by you with that one. We're special. Fuck them.
Okay. Well, do you want to hear my special opinion then? My rarefied opinion?
Well, of course I do.
my holier than thou, better than everyone else opinion on this film.
Bless us with your thoughts.
Bless me, Father, for I have sinned.
Oh, not with the prayers. That's so triggering.
No.
Sorry.
Yeah, this film is pretty anti-religion. If we haven't already told you that several times.
And I mean, it's like disgustingly, aggressively anti-religion.
Yeah, it's definitely not. It's for the heathens. It's a film for the heathens for sure.
Yes, this isn't just like maybe the Bible isn't right. No, that's not here. They take it all the way here.
So I love it too. I mean, it does help if you are a heathen because you will be like, yes, this is glorious. There's
again,
definitely.
We're special.
I mean, that's gonna be a real subjective thing when we're talking about we're special because we are heathens. There's definitely gonna be people that will disagree with us on that one. All right. Well, here's what I think about the film. First of all, I fucking loved it.
Mm-hmm.
I would be very cautious in my recommendation of it, however, because it is one of those films where I'm like, I would recommend it, but with a ton of caveats and a ton of like, here's how to self-select and decide if you're gonna like this film or not. Like if I was talking to somebody I knew and I knew what their aesthetic and their vibe was, like if I saw this film and you hadn't seen it, I would absolutely be like, oh my God, Jamie, you need to see this film. Like you need to see it today, drop everything, stop what you're doing, just fucking go watch this film. But if I'm talking to the masses who I don't know, I'm going to be a lot more careful in my recommendation because it's for show, not for everyone. Like it is way, way, way not for everyone. It's for me. I love the shit out of it.
Well, it is for us. That's part of what makes us special.
I think one of the things that I think, and this is going to sound a little heady for a film of this nature, but I think it does this really great job of like walking this really delicate line between sort of art house aesthetics and grindhouse schlock. Like on one hand, it's very campy and over the top and weird and like exploitation and all that shit. On the other hand, like it has got some really smart, important things to say. Like there's a shit ton of like social commentary, there's media critique, there's surrealism, there's all these like heavy themes and tropes, and there's like elements of porn, and there's Asian trash cinema, and there's just all this shit happening. And it's very interesting, and it's very like you could peel apart the layers for a really long time if you wanted to. And so it's really smart and it's really clever and creative and unique, and I love it. But you don't have to watch it on that sort of intellectual level to appreciate it. You could just watch it as pure schlock and be like, this is fucking fun. And that's cool too. Like it works on multiple levels. And I love films that do that, where they're really bold and audacious and deceptively smart, but also you can just have a hell of a good time with it. So I've put this film in that category and think it really it's not something that I'm gonna forget anytime soon. Like it definitely stands out and it's memorable. It's made on like a $10 budget, and they are so creative on what they do with this very limited resources. And I thought the girl was badass. I thought the lead actress is really committed and amazing and fun. So yeah. Anything to add before we move to the next phase of our lives?
Just it's funny because we sort of thought of this show as it was sort of going to be serious, but I mean, it was sort of going to be a comedy hour because we were going to watch all this goofy shit and just have a gay old time with it. But pretty much everything we've seen, I found a couple of the movies to be a little bit average, but on the whole, we've seen nothing but good movies.
Well,
some great.
I would argue that a movie like Satan's Children isn't a good movie, but it was like a hell of a fun time. But I would argue that we had fun with that one because it is like absolute nonsense. So it's not like we've seen a bunch of like fucking masterpieces. We've just enjoyed everything we've seen, which is somewhat different than saying we've watched a bunch of good films.
I guess. True.
But we could just do a better job picking. Like, I kind of think we're picking films that look good, and maybe we should pick films that look like shit and be a little bit more bold in our selections. I don't know. Thank you so much, Jamie. You're so kind and generous and
sweetie,
and the best.
It'll be fine. You'll be
Thanks,
fine.
Thanks, dear. Thanks, honey.
It'll
I appreciate
be fine.
it.
It'll be fine.
Wow. This was your theme.
Yes.
You picked infected horror films.
Yes.
Do you happen to have a couple, 2, 3, 4 films that fall under this theme that you think are underappreciated and that people should see? And, you can just go through them really quickly. You don't have to give a big synopsis, but just a couple of films that you think people should check out if they like infected horror films.
Well, Anti-Birth with Natasha Lyonne. That's a great one.
Oh my
that
God,
one
yes.
that one falls into the same category as Mad Cowgirl in the sense that it's not linear. It's very colorful. It's very gross. Not gory, but gross. I highly recommend that. The 2010 film Rabies from Israel is that is sort of more in the what we become disturbing category than the fun category. Thanatomorphos, which is on Unearthed Films, is a classic. Don't eat when you see that movie because it's just, its body's falling to pieces, literally. Vaginal maggots. It goes all the way. And Beach House, I believe. Beach House is really good.
Beach House is good.
Yeah.
Those are really, really solid picks.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Don't get too big of a head. So it's my turn to pick the theme for our next episode. And in honor of all the little kiddies going back to school, I'm going to go with school horror. So that is anything that involves a campus or revolves around student bodies. Well, that's it for this week. If you like what you heard, please consider rating and reviewing us on iTunes or leaving us a 5-star review on Spotify. It really helps. And remember, there are vast depths of this genre sea that we've yet to explore. So join us next time as we dive into even more.
Untold.
Wait. Be excellent to each other. Not good,
Jesus.
not okay. I just wanted to wish everybody.
This was fun? ?